Hello, I'm Son of Sonnet, a professional audiobook narrator and voice actor for hire. What follows is an indie author showcase. Select readings of samples provided by the authors at my request. I have not been paid for these performances, nor are they necessarily indicative of future works in production, but I hope you will enjoy them and support the authors who contributed. All relevant links to the authors and their works will be in the description. Thank you. These readings will be what follow. Agent, One Must Stand by Broken Entertainment, Herma's first upcoming novel. Could Be Worse by Robert Van Dusen. An excerpt from his Substack. Skyfold, Chapter 1 by Tim McKay, available now and narrated by himself. Heir of the Dragon, Modern Horrors, Book 1 by Daniel P. Riley. And Star Warden, Volume 1 by Donavan Walker. Or DracoNight. Thank you. Agent, One Must Stand by Broken Entertainment. Zay turned her attention to the next face she was to wear. Her previous persona had served out its purpose, granting her daily access to this target. Aside from that, humans died young and aged poorly. Eventually, her unusual youthful vigor and health would have come into question. Letting her clothes slither away like discarded skin, she crossed to the bed and unhooked the leash from the handcuffs that held her target to the bed. The target was 22 and had recently moved to Germany to live with her new husband, a male she'd met while he was spending time in the U.S. The fresh face meant she could shift her region of study. Politics in Germany and elsewhere had changed rapidly since the onset of the Great Depression, and 1939 promised to be a terribly important year. That meant a change of faces and access. The female's name was Rose Ann Heindren, and more importantly, her mate was Felix Heindren, a member of the Schutzstaffel, the SS. Pulling the female to her feet, she tore the nightgown from the human's body. Rose screamed into a gag, and Zay grabbed her by the throat, turning her to look into her eyes.
"Silence. Remember, I know where your family lives,"
she said, and let her go. The target quailed. She had gotten to know Rose over the last 5 years by working side by side with her as a secretary. It was critical to memorize every curve, every birthmark, every detail of skin and body. Attention to detail was the key to life and death for an agent. Her eye implants allowed her to look through the target's clothes, but she wanted to smell her fear and memorize that as well. Her artificial eyes were limited only by opposing technology and range, but they were strictly visual sensors, and it was the fear scent she wanted to expose. Taking on a new persona was a process that took years of studying and stalking a target. Her preferred method was to befriend or otherwise become a part of the target's life. By now, Zay knew her routines, how she carried herself, how she acted in different circles, and every facet of her existence. Shape-shifting wasn't easy. It took time to perfect a single appearance. There were some she couldn't do at all, like changing genders or taking on a vastly different form. Her target's fear sense spiked tenfold as they let her old face melt away. The dark brown color of her skin faded away and momentarily revealed her base light tan tone before shifting to the target's fairer white skin. Facial features changed next, flowing and shaping like melted wax. Breasts shrank, and dark brown eyes became like polished emeralds. Her slightly heavier figure grew slimmer. She paid the female's thrashing little heed, focusing on the details, sometimes stopping to turn her and study a detail more closely. As part of a mated pair, her target had someone who knew their body without clothes, leaving no margin for error. Soon 2 of the same person stood staring at one another.
"Thank you, Rose Ann. Your silence and calm have been a great help,"
Zay said in the previous face's voice. Zay was a fan of sarcasm, but her targets usually weren't. She thought for a moment and altered the structure of her vocal cords. The trembling female nearly fainted when Zay spoke in her voice.
"There, that's better. It's sometimes hard to get the voice right."
The stolen voice was softer than the one she'd just abandoned, and it took some practice to perfect its tones.
"I think I got it, though, don't you?"
Rose was finally silent and was trembling like a leaf where she cowered against her bed. All the color had gone from her face.
I will take that as a yes,
Zay said, and lifted one of her hairpins from the end table. With a flick of her wrist, the pin darted through the air and punched through Rose's eye, embedding itself into her brain. The human twitched and crumpled to the floor like a sack of meat. Zay, now Rose, crouched and turned Rose's head, pulling free the small rectangular device she'd planted behind her right ear earlier. She placed it in the same spot on her own head and closed her eyes. Pain erupted through the agent's head as a rush of memories flooded into her brain, overriding the stored memories of her previous persona. She focused on the core of who she was to keep herself from being swept away in the tsunami of memories. The unskilled could get lost and be swept away into mental oblivion. She knew several hatchlings in her cadre who never woke up from their first experience. After several minutes, she opened her eyes and removed the device, placing it in a small lockbox with other tools. Slipping the pin from the corpse's eye, she placed it with the tools as well. She didn't clean the bloodied pin. There might be a need for a DNA sample later. The odds were slim, given humanity's rather pathetic understanding of genetic science, but a precaution not taken was a hole in the plan. Zay removed a long, thin pistol from the box and shot the corpse. The body vanished, reduced to particulate atoms. The decon gun lacked the range and rate of fire for battle, but it did the job as an evidence disposal tool. Rose was dead, and no one would ever know. Zay smiled to herself in the mirror. Nazi Germany awaited. Could Be Worse, by Robert Van Dusen, a short story set in the universe of his Get Out Alive zombie novels. Specialist Harry Frakes scratched at the mosquito bite on the back of his neck and stared into the night ahead as if he could pierce the darkness through will alone. They had a pair of NVGs, though batteries were getting hard to come by. The tall, gangling young man scratched again at the red welt, an irritated grimace spreading across his face. Could be worse, Frakes tried to tell himself. Quinn over in second squad wiped his ass with poison ivy yesterday, which, when compared with a few mosquito bites, was much worse. Slightly more pleased, the grimace faded a bit, but he still kept scratching the damn bug bites. The sun had finally decided to go down, which was pretty nice as well. It had been pretty goddamn hot over the last few days, though it was relatively cool in the fighting position he and Daniels occupied. The damp clay of the hillside kept things nice and cool, but they were still pretty snug in their little hole in the ground. Alpha Company, 54th Military Police, had been on their way to Fort Drum thanks to the emergency and had made it all about 10 miles from the armory before hitting the first snarl of traffic. Every Tom, Dick, and Harry seemed like they were trying to get somewhere. It had been a fucking nightmare of honking horns and short tempers. Long short story, Captain Palmer ordered them to get off I-90 to try to find a way around the interstate, and then the 40-odd soldiers dug in at some shit campground in the sticks somewhere. The civilians already there greeted them like something out of the old newsreels Frakes remembered from history class of Allied troops liberating towns in World War II. Of course, most of the company's Humvees and Dusen to halves were practically running on fumes, so it looked like they were pretty much stuck for the time being. Hell, they were pretty low on just about everything except water, thanks to the RV hookups and the faucets on the campsite's office building. The public restrooms were still working as well, so at least they could catch a shower, though the stalls were out of toilet paper. Frakes stretched as much as he could in the rectangular trench. The roof was only a few inches above his head, so it was a little cramped for him. Though it could be worse. The fighting position had to be armpit deep to the tallest man, which was him, but at least he could see out of it. Daniels was barely 5'3", so she had to stand on a tree stump when it came for her turn to stand watch. Naturally, army logic being what it was, Daniels was also the squad's saw gunner. The smallest person in the squad also had to tote around the 22-pound machine gun, never mind the spare barrel and extra 200-round ammunition belt. Daniels returned, sitting on the edge of the fighting position and sliding down into the hole with a grunt. She turned and picked up a green ammo can containing a spare 200-round belt for her saw.
Hey.
The woman tapped Frakes on the arm with a vinyl bag as she arranged the ammo can on the floor of the fighting position.
I miss anything?
Frakes took the MRE, sparing a glance at the woman as she was bent over, a brief look of disappointment flitting across his face. It was too dark to get too much of a look. Nah, nothing, he grumbled as he tore open the ration packet and dumped out its contents of the dirt in front of the position. The man watched the woman out of the corner of his eye as she broke open her own dinner. The pair of them ate in silence for a little while, then Frakes glanced across the position. "Why haven't we ever hooked up?" He mused aloud with a playful hint of a grin. Daniels was not that bad-looking, after all. He liked brunettes, and she managed to look pretty good even in BDUs and body armor.
"Because I have good taste, and Josh would kick your head in," Daniels quipped, flashing a small smile at the man as she scraped the last bits of fruit cocktail out of the foil packet in her hands. The pair exchanged a puzzled glance in the dark when a quiet sound reached them from the civilians' tents. It took a moment or two for Daniels to place it. Somebody was playing Stand By Me on a guitar, their voice barely carrying over the distance between the encampment and their position. She snorted and shook her head. A different sound reached them from the darkness. "The fuck is that?" Frakes furrowed his brow as he lifted the NVGs hanging from the 550 cord around his neck and turned them on. The world turned shades of green and black as he turned his head. The concertina wire set up about 50 meters down the hill from them came into view. Daniels looked at the man, then went to the saw and took up a firing position. He reached for his own M16 as he tried to figure out where that strange groaning noise was coming from. A few people wandered into the edge of the NVG's field of view. Then a few more. Frakes dropped the NVGs and snatched up his rifle, sparing a glance at Daniels as a hollow pop sent a trail of red-gold sparks into the air behind them. The parachute flare burst a couple of 100 feet off the ground, flooding the area with flickering, ruddy light as it floated back to Earth. "Oh, holy fuck," Frakes whispered as the flickering reddish light fell upon the heads and shoulders of hundreds of slouching forms shambling toward them. A handful of sporadic gunshots rang out from somewhere, and then the very air around them seemed to vibrate as all the soldiers opened up, the red tracers flitting through the night like laser beams in a low-budget sci-fi movie. Daniel's eyes went wide as she sent a short burst of 5.56 millimeter toward the figures, the phosphorus on the back of the bullets going over their heads and skipping off into the night. Almost immediately, tiny flames sprang up here and there, lapping at the debris on the forest floor. The woman shifted and fired, shifted and fired, shifted and fired, interlocking her field of fire with the other machine gun positions and the 50 cals mounted on the Humvees behind them. Soon the heavy thunder of the crew-served weapons started to peter out as the gunners ate out their supply of ammunition. And still the groaning, fetid crowd kept coming. Daniels remembered that they had only had 100 rounds of ammunition for each of the heavy machine guns. She lifted her cheek from the saw's buttstock and glanced over at Frakes, her dark eyes growing wild with a rising panic. Men and women reached the concertina wire, seemingly unmindful of the razor-sharp wire that shredded their clothes and skin. Their bodies jerked with the impacts of the bullets as they kept right on coming. A burst of .50 BMG sent parts flying through the air, turning shambling bodies to so much ground beef. Daniel's jaw dropped when she realized that she had been trying to fire an empty machine gun and turned, her shaking hand groping in the dark for the spare can of ammunition. "Ah, shit, Frakes panted when he glanced over at Daniels, who was struggling with reloading the machine gun. The things, were already dragging the concertina wire toward them, eerily backlit by the growing flames behind them as they slouched through the withering fusillade. Panic ran like a wave through the civilians. People screamed as they ran around like chickens with their heads cut off. Horror washed over him when a fresh flare revealed a family of 4, complete with small children in tow, run past him on the right and slap into the horde of creatures. Frakes flipped his weapon selector level to 3-round burst and fired his magazine dry at the screaming pile as the things tore at them like starving dogs. He reached out and grabbed the collar of Daniel's body armor. "Come on! We gotta fall back!" Frakes roared in her ear and shoved her towards the Humvees. Bullets whizzed past their heads as the pair withdrew, one firing while the other fell back and switching off, leapfrogging their way back to the vehicles. "What the fuck? Where did they come from?"
Daniels wondered as she tried to dig the last belt of ammunition from the carrier on her LBE.
"God damn it! Fuck!
Her hands shook like leaves in a hurricane as she knelt in the grass trying to get the saw reloaded. The plastic container slipped out of her grasp and fell to the grass, and she fumbled after it. Something struck her shoulder hard enough to knock Daniels to the trampled earth, and, for a confused, crazed moment, she thought someone had hit her with a sledgehammer. Her eyes went wide when her probing fingers discovered a hot, sticky dampness under her right arm.
"I've been shot. Somebody fucking shot me." Daniels realized, shock numbing the sensation of the wound, though she was aware of a tremendous amount of blood welling inside her body armor. No pain, not yet, though it felt like she was trying to get to her feet on a trampoline after a half-dozen beers when Daniels tried to get to her knees. There was a strange, thick liquid feeling in her chest, and it was hard to breathe. She almost vomited when Frex appeared and hauled her roughly to her feet, throwing her uninjured arm over his neck and half dragging, half carrying her to the circle of vehicles at the top of the hill. Frex looked frantically over his shoulder as they reached the nearest Humvee and carefully lowered Daniels to the ground. It almost seemed like they had somehow wandered into some medieval painting of hell thanks to the yellow-red light from the burning trees and smoke filling the air. A handful of men and a teenage girl were tearing at someone on the ground. A crowd of smoking forms surrounded a Humvee, pounding on it with their fists. He drew his 9mm from its holster on his pistol belt and looked down at the woman leaning against the Humvee tire. The gun bucked in his hand. "Could be worse," Frex muttered under his breath, swallowing bile as he watched the toe of Daniel's boot twitching spasmodically. Perhaps a dozen or so people slouched toward him from all sides. Frex squeezed his eyes shut and jammed the barrel under his chin. "Could be worse." Skyfold by Tim McKay. Chapter 1. Pragos. Rain is the tyranny of gods. 1 day a year, and 1 day only, rain fell on the sovereign capital. A cold, bitter deluge, the kind that stole lives, swept away the untethered, and crept into the bones. The kind of rain even gods know to fear. It felt a cruel joke to be here, on this of all days, after so long envying the sovereigns from afar. Cabot Sovale, now a prime-aged man seeking his due from the world, spent many a day in his youth perched atop balcony rails, brittle breezestone flaking off on his clothes, wet with mist, all to watch the sovereigns fly over their great palaces and citadels. Fiery wings spread wide, unhindered below clear skies, while their subjects suffered under the Skyfold's constant downpour. Many a Praetari, Cabot's older brother included, had been swept off their island streets by such storms as this. Caught in rainslides and swept over the edge of their tiny worlds, there to fall into an abyss only sovereigns could survive. The Skyfold abyss, home to monsters, terrors, and the souls of the damned. It would end today, and Cabot would taste of the life he'd been so long denied. Clear skies, safe homes, and faith those he loved would remain when he woke. "It's time," said Riven beside him. Her grin was contagious, and Cabot couldn't help but smile back. His great love, his partner in life and crime, and the only reason he'd made it this far. Where she went, he followed. Today, that meant climbing the core citadel of High Praetaria, slick with rain, to steal the Skyfold's source. Not for wealth, not for power. For freedom, and the great game she'd taught him. "For Pragos," said Cabot. "Pragos." Riven winked, then leapt from her perch across the expanse before them, all but vanishing in the thick downpour, and tore her rugal picks into the citadel wall. Cabot's heart almost gave out. They hadn't known for sure rugal picks would breach sovereign metal, so there was every chance he'd been about to watch his love plummet to her death. The first of many risks they'd have to take this day in the name of Pragos. Mastery and freedom. From their youth, every low-born citizen of Praetaria was taught the tenets of Pragos, the faith that with mastery of one's domain, however small, came freedom. Utter hogwash, thought Cabot, and he'd been the bane of many an ebon druid's sermon even as a child. Until, that is, the day he met Riven, the raven-haired siren who showed him a better way. Ahead, he took in the sight of her rain-soaked, form-fitted gear with a smirk, waited for her to climb a few arm spans, and leapt in turn. What a rush, and what a jolt when the sovereign wall cracked at his touch. Small spikes in his boots barely caught the wall's edge below, so for a moment he dangled from his rugal picks above, pointed axes blessed with the sovereign's own magic, now turned against them. Strange to depend on their power even now, on the day they meant to forsake their masters once and for all. "Just like the Gap, eh?" said Riven, laughing between heaves as she climbed. "Yeah, right," said Cabin. "You and I have very different memories of that day." "It's all about how it ends." She winked again, then hooked her right-hand pick into a horizontal gap above and shimmied through. All clear! When he reached her, Riven turned back and helped him into the crevice, a breach in the wall where sovereign magic would flood out on the hour. Exhaust, they called it, excess power from their vaunted Rugal glass and the mighty spells keeping the Skyfold in place. Riven sidled up to Cabot and pecked him on the cheek. See? Just like the gap.
Yeah.
He pulled her even closer, savoring the taste of her and tangling his tongue with hers, until she pulled away breathless and pinched his arm. Okay, perhaps too much like the gap, she said with a laugh.
The day they met, he'd been visiting Ebon Tokar, as backwater a township as they came in the Praetari Isles. His friends had dared him to jump the gap, an expanse even wider than the one he'd just cleared between Tokar's flying island and the Forbidden Isles beyond. Little had he known he wasn't the first to cross that day, or the pleasures that awaited him. He'd managed the jump by climbing a Kyalis tree, great aberrations that grew in even the rockiest outcroppings, and leapt from the tallest tree to reach the opposite cliff by a hair. Scared as they were of the drop, his cowardly friends had stood too far back to see him make it, and they'd never have believed what happened next. He'd been about to climb the isle's surface when a rock gave way under his picks, throwing him down where he'd started. Smaller rocks rained down after him and knocked one of his picks from his hand. He cursed, spat blood, and would have been trapped if not for the raven-haired beauty who called down through the mist a moment later. Bathing in a nearby pool and disturbed by his yowl, Riven came running in naught but a sky-cotton towel, fulfilling his every boyish dream when she leaned over the cliff's edge to help him.
Enjoy the view while you can,
she chided as she pulled him up, but, weak from the exertion, she made no effort to adjust the parting fabric thereafter. In truth, he'd had her from the moment she saw him. She later joked that she'd have fallen for a cross-up pup, warts and all, or anyone brave enough to make the leap, and it had been her good fortune he was as dashing as he turned out to be. Crossing the gap had been her secret pleasure for years, and she thought herself alone in her defiance, not just of the Sovereign's edicts, but of the challenge presented by that frightful drop into the Skyfold abyss and the blighted world hidden below. They talked for hours as she attended to his sprained wrist and minor cuts from the rocks, then made love deep into the night. It became a running joke between them how well he'd managed with only one hand, and she promised to stay by his side until she learned what he could do with the other.
Done messing about, you insatiable dolt?
Asked Riven.
We don't have much time.
Oh, come on, said Cabot. We've both climbed higher in half the time. We'll manage. It's Merrick I'm worried about.
He'll be there,
said Riven. Though partners in crime and business, and friends since they were boys, Cabot and Merrick had always been closer to brothers. The sort that spent every waking hour on each other's nerves, yet couldn't keep apart. Bereft of his older brother, Padden, at so young an age, Cabot always felt he owed it to Merrick to stick around. His loss bred loyalty, to a fault if his parents were to be believed. Yet they rented their best land to Merrick's gran at cost and treated both as family, so their disapproval couldn't have run all that deep. Friends to the bitter end, and the chance to pay forward Padden's loss with a new, albeit irksome, brother. No matter how often the lazy fool neglected his half of the friendship or got them into trouble, Cabot would hold true to what life gave him. That was his progos, to master the gifts of friendship and love and give back at every turn, Merrick included.
I can see the shaft. You ready?
Always, said Cabot. Hopefully it's wide enough.
You calling me fat?
I did wonder if you put on a few these last weeks, though I thought it best not to mention. Riven kicked him in the shoulder, just hard enough for her Rugal spikes to cut through. Oi! Yelled Cabot. He laughed and crawled after her, eyes fixed on the red glow ahead where the crevice opened into a vertical shaft climbing up the citadel.
Hurry,
said Riven, this time in a harsh whisper.
I thought I heard...
Fiery orange light passed by the gap's entrance behind them, and what sounded like a bell's chime echoed off the Sovereign's metal in a drawn-out wail. Go, go, whispered Cabot. Riven didn't need to be told twice. She flipped over, hooked her Rugal picks into the exhaust shaft, and pulled herself upright until she could stand, barely fitting in the narrow chute.
At least it's dry,
said Riven with a laugh. Great, said Cabot with a stutter, and no small measure of sarcasm. Hurry up. He'd laugh when he wasn't trapped on display for any passing sovereign, like the one that just flew by to spot and execute him.
Easy, said Riven, shuffling higher. You good?
Right behind you.
Cabot worked his way into the shaft and stuck his picks in the wall under Riven's left boot. He'd barely stood and locked his own boots in the wall when another flash passed through the gap below, this time red, and the sound of bells even louder.
More than one?
Asked Cabot.
Think they're on to us?
We knew they'd leave patrols, said Riven. If they knew our plan, there'd be an army. Cabot shook off his nerves and steadied his trembling legs.
Well, let's hope we're done by day's end, or there'll be an army regardless.
They had until sundown to steal the Skyfold prism, the ancient relic of pure Rugal glass that powered the Skyfold and kept the Praetari Isles safe, from the blighted world below and from the starfall above. Or so the sovereigns said. In truth, monsters aplenty stalked the Forbidden Isles on Praetari's outskirts, even with the blighted world closed off. And Rugal shards, the shattered hearts of dead stars, still fell through the storms to level entire isles, there to be recovered by prospectors like Cabot and turned over to the sovereigns as fuel for their magic. The prism did, however, shield the sovereign citadels from starfall. A crystalline dome deflected Rugal shards away from High Praetaria, with total indifference for those caught in the meteor's new paths. The great dome kept High Praetaria dry all year, save for this day, while its watery exhaust fueled the Skyfold storms that raged past its edges. It seemed to Cabot that the only ones served by the Skyfold and its twofold barrier, the eternal storms above and below their island homes, were the sovereigns. So long as they had their magic and kept the blighted world sealed and forgotten, they cared not a mite for the people who worshipped their brilliance from afar.
Cruel bastards,
thought Cabot. Here, said Riven. Found it. To her right, a diagonal chute sloped into this one from a steel grate a few feet up. It was Merrick's sole task of the day to reach the chute from the other side and let them through. Locked, said Riven. She pressed her boots into the wall above Cabot's head to lend more force to her efforts. Half her body concealed within the smaller chute, but the metal bars remained fixed in place.
Figures.
Riven shuffled back into the main exhaust shaft, then looked down at Cabot. What now?
We wait, I guess. How long?
Riven surrendered one pick to the wall, then pulled a gold chronometer from her pocket. Its Rugal components glowed red through the glass face, so her eyes looked ablaze with the impatient fury they both felt. Minutes, she said, and that's not all. She turned her arm, revealing where the pale skin of her wrist had started to turn a fish-like silver, catching the chronometer's light on the first hints of tiny scales. Even as he watched, the scales condensed and multiplied, a metallic coating that would soon overtake every inch of her God's blessed flesh. And for the first time since they met, he'd been unable to contain their spread. Heir of the Dragon, Modern Horrors Book 1, by Daniel P. Riley. Prologue. Life.
He sits down in the video frame easily, casually leaning back into his seat. He's tall and handsome due to his strong, broad jawline and pointed chin, high cheekbones with deep-set, dark brown eyes. He could be an actor with those looks, that much is true. Even his dark hair has that purportedly messy look that was all the rage in 2002. A thick brown that seems black unless the light hits it just right. However, there's something about him. Something sad. He's dressed in a black V-neck tee and a leather jacket with shoulder straps. No jewelry surrounds his neck, and somehow the lack works for him. It's rugged in its simplicity. He speaks, and his voice is pleasant enough, yet you can hear the anguish of trauma in his words.
My name is David Marsh, and I'm a vampire. 20 years ago, I was no different from you. I had a family, parents that loved me, and I studied economics at Yale and was a member of Kappa Sigma Theta with my two best friends, Zach Hinson and Kelton Blaine. We grew up together, played baseball in high school together, and we were lucky enough to win scholarships to play at Yale together while pursuing our career degrees. Everything was picture perfect. Zach was a charmer, tall, blonde, and always trying to impress with power suits. He studied law like he was born for it. There wasn't a situation he couldn't talk himself into or out of, including most of the sorority dorms. Somehow, he never seemed to suffer for it.
No matter how mad a girl was at him, he had this way about him that eased their anger. Whether it was his boyish looks or his silver tongue, Zach got what he wanted. Always. Kelton, on the other hand, was born in Wisconsin, and as he was fond of saying, they grow 'em big in Wisconsin. Nearly 7 feet tall and chiseled from stone, Kelton should have been a linebacker for the football team. But he wanted to be with his friends, so he chose to play center to Zach's point guard and my small forward positions. With his easy smile and laid-back manner, Kelton was our rock. Nothing fazed him. We used to say, if Kelton's chill, all's good during games. Like Superman, Kelton had a cleft chin and wavy black hair that girls loved more than Zach's charms. Kel wasn't that kind of guy, though, which only made them want him more. He could have easily coasted his way through life, but Kel's work ethic was his greatest strength. Even though his parents were well off, Kel kept busy with studying and 2 jobs. He didn't like being idle, ever. And then there was me, quiet David Marsh. I loved playing basketball, helping my neighbors, and being part of my church community. Raised Catholic, the church was like a second family, and it was hard to leave them for New Haven. Thankfully, St. Thomas More was right on campus, so I felt close to God while far from home. I miss that, feeling close to God. I haven't felt that way for a long time. Not since meeting the woman. College was great. Dorm life took some getting used to, but sharing a room with Kelton made it a lot easier. Mom and Dad helped Kelton and I move in. His parents were busy on the campaign trail. Once we were settled, they hugged me goodbye and turned me loose on the world. That night, Zach coerced us into our first college party. That's just how Zach was. Large and in charge, even as a freshman. That night was our first college fistfight, too, courtesy of Zach. A few of the senior class at the party didn't take to Zach's bombastic personality, and Zach didn't exactly take to their superiority either. They dragged him out of the house party onto the lawn for a beatdown, only to be surprised by the giant Kelton and me having his back. Brotherhood meant everything to us back then. Zach, Kelton, and I practically grew up together. Kelton moved to the neighborhood from Wisconsin when he was 6 years old, right across the cul-de-sac from me. Zach lived north of the circle, and we used to ride our bikes together every day. Riding bikes turned into playdates while our moms drank wine and talked each other's ears off. Soon enough, we were inseparable. The 3 Musketeers. And we tranced those seniors good, too. So good that we received requests to join Kappa Sigma Theta a month later. Zach, of course, leapt to the chance to join the fraternity, and we went along for the ride. It was fun, growing our brotherhood from 3 to 25, despite the hazing rituals and bizarre pledge games. From then on, it was studying all day and partying all night. Zach got us into the coolest ragers, making connections everywhere he went. Sometimes we partied a little too hard, but you know how that goes. College boys being boys. A year later, we were settled into our private rooms in the KST house. New basketball stars, party animals, and the cool kids already. After the first few games of the basketball season, we were legends. Kelton Man of Steel Blaine, shot caller Zach Hinson, and me, David Marsh, the magician. Nothing could stop us. We ran the show all the way to state and won. Probably the hardest part of the year. Trying to keep a GPA up while traveling for games and all that pressure put us through the ringer. Through it all, we leaned hard on each other like we always had. No matter how big KST was, at its core, we were family, just the 3 of us. When the going got hard, everyone on the team got used to the 3 of us isolating ourselves. Training together, studying together, weathering the storm together. It caused some tension, but that's just how we did things. In our second year, some things got harder, and some things got easier. We formed our routine for classes, socializing, and dealing with stress. Zach burned through a ton of girls already. It bothered me more now that we were older, but my brother was my brother. I let it go, no matter how many of them sat me down and wailed about him. Kelton had even started dating, though he was far more respectful about it. It didn't stick, but he didn't seem to mind too much. He'd take a girl out, things would be going great for a while until she couldn't get a reaction from him. They'd break up after that, always because he was too repressed. I think they didn't get him. Cal was always hurt by it. He just didn't express that the way they wanted him to.
I think they wanted him to chase them, but that's never been Ker's style. I wasn't interested in dating, no matter how many Zack pushed my way at parties. I liked talking to girls, but there was so much going on that it didn't make sense to put someone else through my chaotic schedule. I didn't want to treat them like Zack, and I didn't want them to think of me the way they thought of Kel. So I did what I always do. I kept to myself. Zack said I was gaining a reputation for being mysterious. We once stayed a second time, and that's when life really started to take off. We were turning 21, looking at moving into our bachelor's programs, kicking ass at basketball, and life really seemed like it couldn't go wrong. There was no way for us to know it would come crashing down around us. When we were little, we dreamed as all kids do. I'm going to be an astronaut. I'm going to be a superhero. I'm going to be a pilot. None of us thought, hey, I'm going to be a vampire when I grow up. But here I am. Star Warden, Volume 1, written by Donavan F. Walker. Chapter 1, Slayer of Evil. Beneath the two moons of a sunset sky, a knight in blue armor battled fiercely with blade in hand. A rat man leaped down in ambush. The knight turned and swung his bright white and blue blade, cutting through its neck and severing its disgusting head. Yellow blood and guts burned off the blade, returning it to pristine condition. The sword, Dawnbringer, was not one of ordinary make. It was a blade of sun-forged blessed silver that burned the impure and the corrupted. It had a blue-white winged hilt with a golden gemstone in the center, a grip that ended with a bird's head for a pommel. The ability to clean itself was a minor one, but one the knight was no less thankful for, as he did not wish to deal with the fetid smell of the ratman's remains. He turned his attention to the other rats who were in shock at the failed ambush, or perhaps they were being cautious. Whoever called them ratmen must have been polite, as the knight saw very little connection to mankind in any form. They were 6 feet tall with black and brown coats that radiated with a stench akin to a sewer or decaying corpse. Blood-red eyes, white pupils, and yellow sclera added to their monstrous visage. The knight did not take much pleasure in taking life, but he made an exception for these rats. Monsters are evil, and evil needs to be slain. Pure and simple. The rat-men circled around him. From behind his helm, looking through a holographic heads-up display, he made a confident smirk. He beckoned them to bring their best with a raised gauntlet. One rat charged him, making a horrific screech. The knight dodged and allowed it to run into their fellow behind him. He took advantage of their confusion to thrust his blade into the rat's spine, then drew his ray gun with his right hand. He shot the second rat, burning its eyes off. Withdrawing the sword from its back, he quickly severed the first rat man's head to ensure its death was quick. No need for it to suffer further. He moved to finish off the wounded one when he was caught off guard by a mace hitting his side. The Star Warden slammed into a nearby wall. The rat who attacked him closed the distance. The knight cursed under his breath as he blocked the incoming swing with his red cross on white buckler. It was dented and warped by the rat's strength. The knight swung back, but the rat leaped out of the sword's range. He quickly stood, only to face another attack from the wounded rat, which he evaded by mere inches. It was these moments that reminded him that the rats were vicious fighters and could work together well. He mentally kicked himself for getting cocky when he thwarted their ambush. Luckily, he could be just as vicious. The knight engaged with the mace-wielding rat, quickly disarming it. The rat countered by grappling the knight, digging its claws through the dent made in the armor. The knight grunted in pain while the rat laughed. Its last laugh as the knight seared its throat with the particle beam from his ray gun. Powering through his own pain, he focused his attention on the rat with the missing eye. Using the dead rat's body as a shield, he caused the second rat to impale its own sword into the corpse. His opponent, now off balance, could not stop the knight driving Dawnbringer through its chest and slaying it instantly. He held his side in pain as he returned the sword to its scabbard on his back. Keeping his head on a swivel, he shot the rats to ensure they were dead. It wouldn't be the first time they played possum to get an advantage. Exiting the wood and stone building where the battle took place, he looked up at the two moons. The sun had disappeared over the horizon, and soon the green moon, Aurora, would go with it. The dark yellow moon, Fomoria, now took center stage in the celestial theater. It was a gaseous moon with a baleful presence that made the knight feel like he was being watched. He had walked this world for over a year and still could not shake the foreboding feeling that the moon had some sort of malevolent sentience to it. Ancient lore stated that the moon was a physical representation of the abyss, a dark and demonic place. He did not find it hard to believe that it could be true. The knight looked away, only to be reminded of the carnage in front of him. The town of Mono was a crumbling ruin. Parts of the wall were rubble, its marketplace and streets were deserted, a destroyed castle, and a rusting city fountain. Before these times, it would have been just any other river town. There was nothing but a senseless waste of life around him. This town was purged for harboring enemies of the Dark Lord. Charred bodies were scattered about the streets. Some still clutched shields, spears, and ray guns in their hands. A few of them lay under the corpses of ratmen who wore armor and shields carrying the sign of a bull. Pushing those thoughts aside and stepping over some bodies, he arrived at Mono's local theater. The survivors were relaxing in the auditorium. Some were asleep in the chairs, while others conversed. Unlike the knight, they were not human, but fairies, one of the native species on Aetherium. They were winged humanoids that ranged in appearance from a butterfly to a dragonfly. Their ears were long and pointed with vibrant colored skin. Blue, red, yellow, purple, green. Some were orange or shades in between. The eyes were similar in nature, but where the whites would be for humans, it was a lighter variant of the iris's color. The survivors noticed the knight's entrance and turned to face him. He responded with a wave and a friendly voice, giving no sign that he was hurt to keep these fairies in good spirits. His mind, however, was on one fairy in particular. On stage, in the middle of a semicircle of children, was a beautiful fairy woman with long white hair, alluring eyes of royal purple, and skin that shared the color of cherry blossoms. Those eyes shined with love and relief as her face turned to see her knight enter the room. She politely excused herself and stood up. Golden dragonfly wings folded out from her back. Her name is Kaguya, Princess Kaguya, and she stood as gracefully as her regal title would imply. She was dressed simply in a nice top with disconnected sleeves, a skirt with dark tights underneath which led to heeled boots. A golden circlet adorned her head with a red gemstone embedded in the center with the shape of a heart. All of it covered a tall, busty, and curvaceous figure. She was beauty that could not be matched here or on the knight's home world of Earth.
"Sam,"
she said. Her smiling face quickly turned to worry as she noticed the knight's hand on his side.
"What happened to cause this?"
"Occupational hazard. Just a day in the life of a pest exterminator," he said in a casual tone. Kaguya's hand started to glow with a bright light, and Sam moved his hand from his wound. When she touched it, a warm, soothing energy flowed into him as the wound healed. He removed his helm, revealing his fair skin, scruffy and matted black hair, a growing 5 o'clock shadow, and sky-blue eyes. "It's not hazard pay, but hazard pay doesn't come with a beautiful face." He beamed a bright smile at her.
"Your compliments are always appreciated, but do not change the subject. What happened?"
"Those last 2 rats turned out to be 4 and ambushed me. One got a good hit that dented my armor, and stuck his claws in my skin. Only God knows where those things have been."
"I am sorry I could not be there to help."
"Couldn't be helped. You were tired, and we both assumed there were only 2. Sam yawned. "Besides, your magical and medical skill was needed here. Speaking of rest, I could use some sack time."
"Please pardon the interruption,"
an elderly voice said. The 2 turned in the direction of the voice and saw a fairy, dressed in clerical robes with a sun necklace, walk over to them. If it was not for his voice, Sam would have assumed he was a young fairy, considering his facial appearance. Fairies in general appeared youthful and beautiful, making it difficult for Sam to tell how old one was outside of their voice. What helped sell his age was he clearly had trouble getting to his knees.
"There is no need for you to kneel, good priest,"
said Kaguya.
"I dare not contradict you, your radiance. However, I know no other way to thank you and your brave champion. We prayed for Kira's divine grace to shield us, and she went above and beyond, not only sending the Star Warden, but also her emissary."
"Just doing my duty." To him, it was just a duty. One he enjoyed as it helped others. He never saw himself, however, as some divinely appointed warrior. He kept his opinion on such matters to himself, as who was he to disabuse someone of that notion if it gave them hope? Traveling with Kaguya only added to that impression thanks to her status as the celestial emissary. It is believed that the celestial emissary is an angel given a fairy form, always appearing with white hair and purple eyes, sent by Kira on a mission to aid and guide the people of Aetherium while protecting them from great evil. Kira is the celestial power of light, love, and mercy, one of the 3 gods worshipped on Aetherium. Sam had asked Kaguya about it some time ago, and she wasn't sure about the truth of the matter. She accepted the title as simply another part of her own duties.
"Rise, good priest,"
Kaguya aided him.
"We appreciate your gratitude, but now you must rest, as we all must leave at dawn's first light. The Mystic Woods is the only safe place from the hands of the enemy."
"Of course, Your Radiance," said the priest. "Thank you again, Sir Warden, for saving all of us."
"You're most welcome," he said mid-yawn.
"Excuse me."
The 2 took their leave after the others gave their thanks. They lay together on a mat in one of the old dressing rooms. On each of their left hands, a silver band sat upon their ring fingers.